This is Israel Balderas. Thank you so much for tuning in to our politics and media show. We call this The Z Factor, Shaping Election 2024. With me, I've got three amazing journalists, political analysts, insightful folks who are thinking about election 2024. Hopefully you are too. With me, I've got Cassie Weymouth, I've got Guy Brill, and I've got with me Landon Lepley. All of them have been following what's happening in elections 2024. So let me start with you, Landon. Where do we stand right now with 40 days left until we all vote?
I personally think that it's relatively close, this race. I know that Kamala Harris, she is up roughly 5 points at this point. But I do think it's worth noting that on her rally in Pennsylvania this week, I believe she attempted to discuss her policies regarding how she's going to fix the economy, which I know is which is something that is on a lot of the conservative people's minds. She discussed how she wants to do a pragmatic approach, which I think is very reasonable. She wants to do tax cuts.
As president, I will be grounded in my fundamental values of fairness, dignity, and opportunity. And I promise you I will be pragmatic in my approach.
However, she was not mentioning anything that she hadn't talked about before. So she was just repeating previous comments and not diving into specifics.
So she's again saying the same thing she's been saying since she became the Democratic presidential candidate.
Yes.
And Guy, that certainly has been the criticism of Harris out there, that she has big platitudes. She talks about being the uniter, right, not the divider. But when it comes to policy, it seems that we're starting to see in the headlines that people want more, at least more substance.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're starting to see her do a few more interviews, which was a big criticism during our practice show. So she is getting herself out there. But yeah, she is keeping things pretty vague. She's identifying some of the things in Trump's plans that she doesn't think will work or haven't worked during his administration. We've heard the phrase opportunity economy a lot. We've heard that she wants a two-state solution. These are all, great ideas. I would love to know how they would happen, but
on the other side, Cassie, if Kamala Harris is not saying enough, Trump is saying too much. He continues to be out there on the campaign trail. And one place where he's visiting a lot is North Carolina. As we can see here, the race is even between Harris and Trump. But in North Carolina, there's a slight little problem, maybe I should say a big problem, and that is that the Republican candidate for governor has had some problems over the last week. How are you seeing how North Carolina is playing out, given that the gubernatorial candidate on the Republican ticket may be bringing down the poll numbers for Trump?
I think at the end of the day, North Carolina will still be very close. There have been several cases where perhaps the governor race has gone blue while the presidential race in that state has gone red. So I wouldn't say that it necessarily will have a major impact. It definitely does not look good for the Trump campaign. And though Mark Robinson was not at one of his rallies, they have not officially disavowed him yet. You hear many Republicans who have gone on to interviews say that they are waiting for there to be solid proof. So it will be very interesting to see what happens in the next few days, I think, as the investigation goes on.
Landon, Cassie is exactly right. Trump has been twice now in North Carolina since CNN broke the story that at one point Mark Robinson went to a porn site. Allegedly, he said things about Nazism and about, where he stands as an African American. But Trump hasn't said one way or the other, I disavow or I support. And this was a candidate that Trump supported. Looking at these numbers here, as we look at the trajectory over the last month, it has been tight over and over. How are you seeing North Carolina? I mean, 47.8 to 47.4. It seems like those numbers aren't changing. Do you see anything that could go one way or the other, tipping those numbers one way or the other?
In all honesty, I do not. Kind of going off of Cassie's previous comment, we have seen a lot of interviews from Republicans at the Mark Robinson rallies or just his gatherings, and they have all said, most of them have said that they, like, whether or not this is going to be disavowed or whatever, this is not going to persuade their vote. And we saw a very similar thing up in New York with who is the governor, I believe, who is under fire for the mistress allegations for his ethics?
Congressman, that's correct. We could always look it up since we are New York congressman with mistress. That is a weird search. Anthony Despacito.
Yes, Despacito. So he is currently under fire for hiring his mistress and his fiance's daughter. And NBC did an interview with just someone who has previously voted for him. And that individual said that he used to think that ethics and morals were something that he really valued in a candidate. But after this is coming out, he is not so sure anymore. So I think we're going to see something very similar in North Carolina.
Guy, Landon is absolutely right. People have been asked at these rallies, do you support Trump? Do you support Mark Robinson? And they've been saying exactly what Landon is reporting, that these folks are saying, I'm still sticking with Trump. Across the board by now, with 40 days left into the election, it seems that people are either on one side or the other, but there's that middle, right? That 10% that still haven't decided one way or the other. What issues are you seeing that are playing, high on voters' mind out there on the campaign trail?
Yeah. Well, in the instance of Mark Robinson, yes, we're not seeing a lot of budging from people who are already going to Trump rallies. But we do have that small bubble there of people who are undecided, and I think it could be a pretty big break if someone was like, well, I was considering voting for this guy, but he did refer to himself as a Nazi. That could be a pretty big deal breaker for people who are mostly undecided. And it seems to be the same issues as usual that seem to be the deciding vote. Right now it's the economy, the abortion, and immigration.
Right, and violent crime still leading issues.
Violent crime, despite being pretty low nationally, is still becoming like the buzz word for Republicans.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So they're trying to create a sense of fear around that. Back to what the usual issues were probably in 2016. Last presidential election we had the global pandemic and the protest against police brutality, which sort of became the main issues there. But we're back to what the issues usually ended up being.
Guy just mentioned here are the top 4 issues, right? We've got the economy, we got immigration, we got violent crime. Those are top issues. Speaking of immigration, here is a poll from Arizona, right? This is sort of an average of polls. Kamala Harris is going to be in Arizona on Friday. She's going to be talking about immigration, laying out her plans. Some are concerned that this may bring up the fact that Biden and Harris may have had issues with how they handled the immigration problem in the last 3.5 years. Again, your opinion. This is a good idea. This is a bad idea. She's going to Arizona. It's a must-win state. How do you see that playing out?
I do think it's a good idea that she's going to Arizona. The main critic of Harris has been she needs to talk about policy. Immigration is a really big one that she has not really discussed previously, and I do think that it gives her an opportunity to set the record straight on her and Biden's policy surrounding immigration. The question is whether or not she will take full advantage of the opportunity that she has now.
What do you think, Landon? I mean, obviously, Trump has tried to criticize Harris on immigration. This can be seen as her saying, I'm going to tackle this issue head on, I'm not going to shy about it, and I'm going to talk about what I plan to do over the next 4 years.
Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful that she talks about her policy towards immigration because that is something that we really haven't heard that much from her. But in terms of her going to Arizona, there was a poll by Fox News saying that the top 4 biggest issues for Arizonian voters were the inflation, preservation of democracy, immigration, and abortion. in that order. So immigration is not the first thing on Arizonians' minds, which I think is it's honestly a very shocking statistic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and inflation, certainly the economy still continues to be important. Here at Elon University, Guy, certainly we're in a bubble, but when it comes to your parents, right, and to your family, extended family, they talk about the economy. How are people feeling out there? I go to the grocery store, I still see high prices. Is this going to be a factor, in your opinion, come election day?
Yeah, it's affecting everybody. I hear from my parents, I hear from my friends when I have to go grocery shopping, and I feel like prices are leveling out a bit now, so who knows if they level out in the next 40 days, that could be the thing that solidifies a lead for Harris, but the economy moves at the speed the economy moves, and I think it's very easy to blame all economic issues on the president. The president, realistically, there's hundreds of other factors that impact everything. So this will be, but it's hard to understand that, especially when you're paying twice as much as what you should be for gas. So, this will be a big sticking point. One thing that gets brought up against Harris a lot is, why aren't you doing what you are promising now while you're currently sitting as the vice president? So I think she might have to answer for that on the economy, but yeah.
On that point, Cassie, there seems to be, I would say, a separation between Wall Street and mainstream. As we see in the headlines, Wall Street, we're seeing record highs, right? People who have, portfolios and stocks are doing well. Main Street, people who have to buy gasoline and milk at the grocery store, they still see these high prices. And certainly Harris is talking about the middle class. Again, we hear about the middle class. How are you seeing it? And because you have been out there, you've been doing stories on this. Is that resonating? That she's fighting for me, or is it like Trump, that he's the candidate of the wealthy? How do you see it, that theme is playing out?
I do think that is a focal point of her campaign. She says it in almost every speech. I do think that it is starting to land flat, because you hear her in every speech go, I am from the middle class, I understand exactly where people are coming from, but she has yet to talk about how she is going to improve the cost of living. So I really think it just goes back to her needing to talk about her policy, and maybe not coming from, let me rephrase this, she's really great at assimilating herself with the middle class, but she has yet to actually tell them how she will fix their problems, and I think that should be her main focus.
Right, and to that point, it seems like on stage, she has these great moments, these great speeches. I'd love to get your take on this one, and I'm not throwing a curveball on you, but it really is, because we've been talking about this issue. This was an op-ed piece that was written by Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal. And this is the line that she said that I'd love for you to weigh in. Joe Biden stepped aside and Ms. Harris was elevated 2 months ago. That is enough time at least to start making clear what she believes, wants, and means to do. She hasn't. This week, she couldn't or wouldn't answer a single question straight, and people could see it. She is an artless dodger. If this is how the perception is there enough time for her to change that perception, in your opinion, with 40 days left? Or is this wrong? Is Peggy absolutely wrong when she says that Harris is an artless dodger?
No, I don't think she's wrong at all. I just think that both parties, we hold our candidates to different standards, and there is such a double standard that needs to be taken for granted. I think both candidates, they aren't truly answering questions that are being presented to them, and they are not answering them in a timely, factual way, or just answering them at all. So I think that there is time for her she could start answering questions. She could start informing the public about her policies.
She could start answering questions from journalists, right?
She could.
She could sit down with her journalists.
Yes, yes, she could.
Ms. Harris, we got a journalist here. We got another journalist over here who they would be more than happy to sit and talk to you about this.
Yes, I just think if she truly wanted to, she could.
Yeah.
But will she? I don't know.
Are we being too hard on Kamala Harris? Do we have a different standard? Trump, for example, he says things that, again, harmful, hurtful. He was speaking to a group of Jewish voters saying, I lost because of you. And if you don't vote for me, Israel will be gone in 2 years. What do you all think? Is this a case of being a double standard because it's a female candidate versus a male candidate?
I do think there is an element of that. I think Kamala Harris, she has a rough setup. She's trying to present herself as the unity candidate at a time where her own party is probably more divided than they've been at any point in recent memory on an issue, and she has to thread that needle while also trying to win over moderate voters. To the point of, people are saying, for example, at the debate that people were going easy on her. It's really hard to fact check Kamala Harris on talking the way a normal politician would when the other guy is spreading blatant lies. You can't really focus in on her because you have to do so much damage control on what Trump is saying. So.
Yeah, and she was interviewed by MSNBC this week, Cassie. And even in that interview with Stephanie Ruhle, I saw her on MSNBC, and even she was frustrated that Kamala Harris wouldn't answer correctly. At some point, is this going to start hurting her? Is this a case where journalists are just trying to, again, the media is the one that wants to get clicks, right, so that we can go to the story? Or is this the role of journalists that we have to ask tough questions regardless of whether it's Trump or Harris?
I do think journalists have a responsibility to ask those tough questions. Regardless of which candidate that you are asking, I think the American people deserve to know who they're voting for. And part of that comes with tough questions. And kind of going back to the double standard between Trump and Harris, I completely agree. There is a double standard, I believe, but it is extremely hard to compare the candidates to each other because you're seeing Trump say, in some cases, wildly outlandish things, and it's how do you mitigate that versus Harris, who might not be answering the questions, but also is, for the most part, not blatantly lying.
You can see why I love teaching at Elon, because I got 3 amazing students. Cassie, Guy, Landon, thank you so much for your insights. We'll continue to follow this. Less than 40 days left to the election. We'll see you next time.